Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the hidden architecture that actually protects our entire financial system. And no, it's not about big vaults or bars of gold. It's about something way more complex and, frankly, more interesting: collateral. We're going to get into how this whole system is tested and, where the real risks are hiding.
It's a pretty powerful thought, right? You post an asset as a guarantee and it just feels completely secure. But here's the thing. In the super-fast digital world of modern finance, the word solid is, well, it's a relative term. The real strength of that collateral? You only find that out when the system gets pushed to its absolute breaking point.
All right, let's dive right into this. We start with what seems like a really simple idea. Collateral is the bedrock of finance. It's the promise that, hey, if a deal goes south, there's a safety net. But as we're about to see, this bedrock, it's got some hidden fractures, some serious vulnerabilities that only show up when they're under immense pressure.
So how do you find those fractures before a real crisis does it for you? Simple. You create the storm on purpose. And that brings us to the first critical piece of our modern financial architecture: stress testing. You should really think of it as the ultimate financial fire drill, a simulation designed to see what and who is left standing after a total worst-case scenario plays out.
So what exactly are regulators cooking up in these fire drills? Well, they are simulating absolute, total financial chaos. They're asking all the scary questions. What happens if bond prices suddenly just collapse? What if the markets that provide short-term cash just freeze solid? Or what if one of the big players goes under and can't pay? They even test for something called haircut expansions, which is just a fancy way of saying the value of your collateral suddenly gets slashed. Every one of these scenarios is a rock they throw at the system just to see if it'll crack.
And what if the system discovers that the collateral just isn't enough? That's when a very precise automated cascade of events kicks off. First, you get a margin call, basically an urgent text for more money right now. If that doesn't work, assets get liquidated automatically. Then, emergency backstop funds are tapped. And all of this is happening while supervisors are getting alerts. This isn't panic. It's a pre-programmed emergency procedure that's been hardwired into the system. But, and this is a big but, that whole procedure only works if the system knows exactly who owns what.
Which brings us to a tricky question. What if the collateral you thought was yours wasn't just yours? This is where we get into the next layer of complexity, a kind of ghost in the machine that makes everything we just talked about way more complicated. It's a practice known as rehypothecation.
Okay, let's break that down. So you post an asset, let's say a bond, as collateral for your trade. Simple enough. But then your broker takes that exact same bond and uses it as collateral for their own trade. Suddenly, the same asset is doing double duty or triple duty or even more, backing multiple deals all at the same time. Yeah, it's efficient for sure, but it also creates this tangled, hidden web of who owes what to whom.
And this slide just illustrates that conflict perfectly. Over on the left, you've got the ideal scenario. Your asset creates a direct safety buffer just for your risk. Clean, simple. But on the right, you have the reality of how it's often used, for leverage. Now your asset is part of a chain, connecting you to all sorts of risks that you have zero visibility into. It's one asset, but it has two totally different functions, creating a world of hidden exposure. So, the big question is, how do regulators stop this from just spiraling out of control? Well, the answer really comes down to data and rules. It takes an incredibly sophisticated database to track exactly who owns what and where it's being used at any given moment. Then, they put firm restrictions on how and when these assets can be reused. And most importantly, they run those stress tests we talked about. But these ones are specifically designed to see what happens if one of these long, tangled chains suddenly breaks and starts to unwind.
Now, it's important to remember, none of this just appeared out of thin air. The 2008 financial crisis was the massive wake-up call. It exposed just how fragile these collateral chains really were. So the Dodd-Frank reforms that came after weren't just about writing new rules. They were basically a mandate to build a smarter, more transparent system, one that's powered by much better data and the kind of tough testing we've been talking about.
And that leads us to our final section, and really, to the modern reality of our financial system. The solution wasn't just about more regulation. It was a fundamental shift in technology, in architecture. We've literally moved from a system built on trust to a system built on proof. And all of it is built on what you could call a fortress of data.
This, right here, is the key takeaway. Collateral is no longer just some static asset sitting quietly in an account. Not at all. It's a dynamic data point. It's constantly being modeled against thousands of possible scenarios. Its value is tracked in real time, and its strength is tested against simulated crises all day, every single day.
It's become an active, data-driven defense system. And frankly, it's the only way to see through the fog that practices like rehypothecation create.
And there it is. This is really the heart of the whole thing. Every single action we've talked about, the stress tests, the margin calls, the tracking of reused collateral, it's all powered by a massive database. That is the invisible engine of financial stability today, a vast, interconnected record of every asset, every possible future, and every single link in the chain, especially those hidden links.
So let's end with this thought. We have spent decades building this incredible technological fortress to protect our financial system, and we've replaced murky promises with transparent data. But if that data is now the true foundation, if it's the new bedrock, what's its stress test? What happens when the very system that's designed to test for risk becomes a source of risk itself? Now that's the question for the next chapter of this story.